We all knew I could not resist the siren's call, the sweet, sweet temptation to try my hand at painting the greatest swordsman in all of Warhammer 40k, Lucius the Eternal. A generous zealot gifted me my new favorite model from the Emperor's Children range, and today I'm going to show you how I transformed gray plastic into the egocentric maniac that is Lucius. Now, if you want to see how I built and prepared Lucius for his grand debut, then you can go watch the VOD after this video where I assembled and primed him. But for now, it's time to paint. Before I even touched Lucius, I wanted to paint his glorious plinth for him to lord over those he had struck down and gloat to his heart's content, which is why I began with his base. Not wanting to outshine the hot-headed swordmaster, I decided to keep the base very neutral, starting with a single coating of gray over the broken Imperial structure. Next, a deep black on the poor, fallen Iron Hand that stood no chance against Lucius, followed by the Marine's namesake Iron color to bring out that bionic limb from beneath the crushed rubble and to paint his chapter colors on his pauldron. Satisfied with how the dead Marine was looking, I refocused my attention on the scenery. Reviewing the broken Duracrete, I found it was too dark, so I added a dry brush highlight using a light gray. Then I darkened the more crumbled debris using a black wash to help differentiate the two different types of debris textures. Finally, I added texture paint to cover the remaining exposed black plastic, really taking my time so that I could blend the texture paint into the sculpted structures. Then I let it dry for about 2 hours, thinly coated it in the same black wash as before, added a final very light dry brush, and we can move on to today's main event. Hey guys, it's just me and Shay here jumping into the video to remind you to hit that subscribe button, as well as to smash that like button if you've been enjoying the content with us today, because I really like having Shay on, and if you want to see her come back, you should definitely subscribe. Now, if you want even more content with us, you can check the links below. We have links to both our safe for work content as well as our spicier content. So there's plenty for you to explore. Now, let's go ahead and get back to the video. I prepared Lucius in the same way as the base, and much like the base, I started on Lucius's armor with a dark gray, Citadel's rattling grime to be precise. Why, you might ask, when it is known that the Emperor's Children's armor is canonically black? Because rattling grime, when layered in multiple thin coats, creates a beautiful, corrupted black tone with depth that I think works perfectly for Slaanesha's boys. And because it's more transparent than Black Templar straight out of the pot, all of those screaming faces adorning his armor that you see will be so much easier for me to glaze with paint later to really make them pop. Like the flash of silver his enemies see in the darkness before he cuts them down with the blade of Laer, so too is Lucius's black armor trimmed in silver. And oh, do I love how delicious this already makes him. Excuse me. Not only is his armor trimmed in silver, but I used the same metallic on the aforementioned blade. Lucius prides himself on his deadly abilities, even when they're being buffed by the performance-enhancing drugs stored on his back, which endlessly pump into his system, which is why the vials containing those concoctions are adorned in gold. But I don't want to stop with the gilding there, for the quillion in his sword must be bright and flashy as well. Once the metallics were dried, I glazed them with a black wash to soften their sheen ever so slightly. I wanted them to look worn but well maintained, as there is no way that Lucius wouldn't be meticulous about his gear's upkeep. Please direct your attention back to the souls of the fools who challenged Lucius and learned just how inferior they are, and whom now reside trapped eternally in the armor of the greatest swordsman. This is where I brought in some brighter Slaaneshian hues, glazing Magos purple over all those screaming faces to help segregate them away from the black armor before using the same color on Lucius himself. I found undercoating living tissues with a layer of warm purple helps them stand out away from their undead counterparts. Once that purple undercoat was dry, it's time to glaze on his extremely pale flesh tone. being careful to not lose any of the details on his hands or face, as I want all of those delicious scars he's decorated himself with to stand out. I was so pleased with how Lucius himself was looking, but his is not the only flesh we need to paint. For the stitched loincloth, I wanted each piece to look like it had come from a different victim, which is why I avoided any of the purple underwash here. Instead, I grabbed a different army painter flesh tone for each section and then glazed a brown wash over top of those once they had dried to create an aged effect. The last thing that I took care of before I moved on to the details was I coated anything that was leather in snakebite leather. Quick and effective. Now for the part that I've been most excited to paint, the lash of torment. Oh, and all of those delicious wet tongues. Speaking of, I started them with a dark pink. Lucius's and the smaller tongue coming off of his shoulder got coated entirely in this color. But for the lash of torment, I want to wet blend that bright pink into a deep purple. So that's exactly what I did. Going only a quarter of the way down the lash with pink, I then switched to a contrast purple, starting at the opposite end of the lash and making sure to blend the two colors together while they were still wet. We are so close to being able to attach Lucius to his base, but we still have a couple of important details left to paint. First, there was the cord of the delicate Slaaneshium emblem hanging from his waist. Then there was the massive amount of demonette flesh stretched across his back. Admittedly, I probably should have painted that while I was working on his armor. Next, I painted his heeled hooves and then took care of the pretty gem on the aforementioned emblem. To finish his armor, I picked out 4 different toxic-looking greens from my collection and applied those across the 5 vials on his back, making sure to vary the liquid amounts in each of the containers. After everything was dried, I glued Lucius to his base and let him set for about an hour before I got to tufting. I needed more color on this project. He's a Slaanesh worshiper for chaos's sake. And in my head, chaos is garish and vibrant, which is why I picked out a bright green, pink, and purple to use as my grass tufts on his base. Using tweezers to make my life easier, I added grasses and then flowers and then more grasses until I was satisfied. And now we can take a look at the completed model. And here he is. Delightful, wonderful, sensational Lucius the Eternal, the greatest swordsman in all of Warhammer 40k. I am so bloody pleased with how he turned out. I genuinely was very nervous going into this because I had extremely high expectations of myself in completing this model. I really wanted to do him justice. I love the Emperor's Children. I think Slaanesh is fantastic. She is my patron god after all, and I wanted to do one of her greatest boys so much justice, and I think I did. I think I did a really good job. I'm extremely happy with how Lucius turned out, and I would love to know your thoughts down below on what you think of him, how I could improve him potentially in the future, or if you just think he's already perfect. I'm so pleased with him. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and before I head out, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody for watching this video, but an especially huge thank you to my patrons and YouTube members, because without your guys' support, we would not be able to do this. So genuinely, thank you so much for supporting us and helping us make content like this. Anyways, I have been Angela, your hobby demonette, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.